From the outside, Claire had the kind of life most people scroll past with a tinge of envy. She had just turned 30, ran her own boutique design agency in the city, and lived in a sunlit loft lined with plants and books. But for all her success and independence, the silence in her apartment at night often swallowed her whole. That changed the day she met Evan. It wasn't in some whirlwind, movie magic sort of way. There was no slow-motion walk, no spilled coffee and accidental hand-brushing. It was quieter than that, subtle, sincere. Claire had been volunteering at a local community center, designing promotional flyers pro bono for their annual fundraiser. Evan was there working as a part-time archivist, hired to digitize old community records. He sat in a wheelchair, a sleek black frame with silver spokes, which he maneuvered with such ease it almost vanished into the background. Almost. Evan had a soft, observant way about him. He listened more than he spoke, but when he did speak, it was with a quiet confidence, a voice that seemed to know the weight of words. Claire found herself drawn to him, not in pity, not even initially in attraction, but in curiosity. There was something different, as though he lived inside a secret that made the world around him feel like a stage he'd already seen the ending of. They began having lunch together in the small back courtyard of the center. It started with work talk, then drifted into books, music, memories of childhood, and eventually shared silences that said more than words could. Claire had dated before, mostly men with ambition, ego, and a tendency to treat relationships like transactions. With Evan, she felt something different. Presence. She noticed herself lingering after their conversations, thinking about the questions he asked, the way he paid attention not to impress, but to understand. Still, when she told her friends about him, their reactions flickered between forced smiles and awkwardly phrased concerns. "You're dating someone in a wheelchair," her friend Maya had asked one night, wine glass in hand, voice carefully neutral. Claire's response was calm. "I'm dating someone named Evan." Evan had suffered a spinal cord injury in his early 20s during a hiking accident in the Blue Ridge Mountains. He never shied away from the details, but he also never wore them like armor. He'd rebuilt his life from scratch, learning, adapting, creating a space for himself in a world that often moved too fast and too high. A year into their relationship, he proposed. It was simple, just the two of them at the park bench where they'd first shared coffee. He'd slipped her a ring inside a small, worn copy of The Little Prince, a story they both loved. Her answer had been immediate. Yes, but that was when things began to shift. The first sign came in the form of a letter, a plain envelope, no return address, resting on her doormat. Inside was a single photograph, an old, grainy image of Evan, standing. No wheelchair, no explanation. She stared at it for minutes. The edges of the photo were curled, like it had been hidden away for years. Evan had never shown her any photos of himself before the accident, claiming most were lost in a move after his parents passed away. This one looked like it had been taken after the supposed timeline of his injury. She confronted him that night, holding the photo in trembling fingers. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice unusually flat. "It was left at my door." "Evan, were you walking after the accident?" He stared at the photo, then back at her, the corner of his mouth twitching almost imperceptibly. "That's from before. Someone's playing games. Maybe it's been edited. People are cruel, Claire." But something in his tone didn't sit right with her. It was too rehearsed, too calculated. After that, small inconsistencies began to pile up. Late-night phone calls he wouldn't explain. A locked drawer in his study that he never let her near. A strange symbol etched into the bottom of his wheelchair that she swore hadn't been there before. And then came the dream. Claire woke one night to a sound, a soft metallic click, like wheels on tile. But when she turned over, Evan wasn't beside her. She walked into the living room and froze. The wheelchair sat empty. The back door was slightly ajar. She stepped outside into the cool darkness, her eyes adjusting to the moonlit backyard. At the far end, near the fence, she saw him, standing, barefoot, silent. She couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. She blinked hard, and in that moment, he turned, saw her, and sat down quickly, vanishing into the shadows. When she asked him the next day, he laughed. "You must have been dreaming, Claire." But she wasn't. She knew what she saw. Still, she married him. Not out of delusion, not even out of love, though that was certainly part of it, but because something inside her needed to know the truth. Who was Evan really? What had he buried so deep that he wore a false disability like a second skin? The wedding was small. Just a few friends, some family, and a venue tucked into the woods. Evan's vows were beautiful, his hands warm as they held hers. But when he slipped the ring on her finger, she noticed something cold pass through his eyes. Like a shadow, fleeting, there and gone. That night, after the laughter had faded and the guests had gone, they returned to their secluded honeymoon cabin. It was remote, Evan's idea. No distractions, he'd said. Just us. She should have felt peace. Instead, the walls felt like they were listening. At midnight, Claire woke again. This time not from a sound, but a feeling, emptiness. The bed beside her was cold. She walked barefoot down the creaky stairs, heart thudding louder than her steps. She moved through the cabin, calling softly. No answer. She opened the back door, and what she saw made her heart stop. Evan, standing once again. But this time, not alone. He stood face to face with a figure cloaked in darkness, tall, unmoving, with eyes that burned red against the night. They didn't speak. They didn't have to. And just as Claire gasped, the figure turned its head slowly toward her. She slammed the door shut and locked it, backing away, trembling. When Evan came back moments later, he was back in the chair, drenched in sweat. "What's wrong?" he asked, breathless. Claire said nothing. But she knew. She knew she had just married into something far darker than a mystery. She had married a man who could walk, but pretended not to, and that was the least disturbing part. Because now, she wasn't sure if Evan was entirely human. Claire didn't sleep for the rest of the night. She lay in bed beside Evan, listening to the rise and fall of his breathing, watching the pale moonlight trace shapes on the ceiling. Her mind screamed with questions, but her lips remained sealed. Something primal held her back, an instinctive warning not to confront him. Not yet. Morning came too brightly, too normally. Evan stretched and smiled as if the night before had never happened. He brewed coffee, kissed her forehead, and hummed an old jazz tune as he flipped pancakes. It was the behavior of a man utterly at peace, or one who was pretending to be. Claire forced herself to play along. She smiled. She laughed at his jokes. But behind her eyes, suspicion smoldered. That afternoon, while Evan was in the shower, she searched his suitcase. Inside were neatly folded clothes, a small shaving kit, and a black leather-bound journal with no name. It was locked. No key in sight. She tucked it back before he emerged, his skin steaming and hair wet. He leaned in for a kiss, and she obliged, but her heart raced. Something about that journal felt forbidden, like it held answers she wasn't supposed to know. Later, while Evan napped on the couch, Claire ventured outside. The area surrounding their cabin was heavily wooded. No cell service. No neighbors. Just towering pines and the occasional distant sound of water flowing through the valley below. She retraced her steps to where she'd seen Evan standing the night before. The earth was damp and soft, but there, just beneath the grass, she saw them. Footprints. 2 sets. One clearly Evan's. The other, not human. The impressions were longer than any shoe print. Thin at the heel, but splayed at the front, with far-clawed toes. Deep, like something heavy had pressed down. She crouched, tracing the shape with her fingertips. They weren't fresh, but they hadn't been there long either. The thought chilled her. Whatever had visited Evan, it had come from the woods, and it had walked away. Claire felt the pull of the forest, like something was watching her between the trees. She turned sharply, but saw nothing. Still, she hurried back to the cabin, locking the door behind her. Evan acted as if nothing had happened. That evening, as the fire crackled and wine flowed, Claire attempted subtle probing. "Have you ever been here before?" she asked, trying to sound casual. Evan paused. "Once, a long time ago, with my parents. They are both gone now, right?" He nodded. "Yeah, car crash. 10 years ago." Claire tilted her head. "I thought you said they died right after your accident." A flicker of hesitation crossed Evan's face. It lasted only a second, but Claire saw it. "Right," he said, "recovering. I meant shortly after. Same year. Sorry, I forget how long ago it's been." But Claire didn't believe him. His words felt hollow, rehearsed. That night, while Evan slept, she retrieved the journal from his bag and searched the room for anything that could serve as a key. Her fingers trembled as she checked drawers, under cushions, inside lamp bases, until finally, in the hollow leg of the nightstand, she found it, a tiny, antique key no larger than her thumbnail. She sat in the bathroom, door locked, heart pounding as she opened the journal. Inside were pages filled with careful handwriting, symbols, and sketches. The first pages were benign, lists, memories, notes. But as she flipped deeper, the tone changed. There were passages written in a language she didn't recognize. Sketches of creatures with two long limbs and eyeless faces. Notes about the watcher beneath the soil and gates hidden in broken bodies. One passage was circled repeatedly. "The wheelchair is the seal. The illusion binds the truth. If I walk freely, it awakens." Claire's blood turned cold. She reread it, again and again. The wheelchair wasn't just a tool. It was a ward, a binding. Suddenly, the pieces began to slide into place. The secrecy, the avoidance, the standing at night, the figure in the woods. Evan wasn't pretending to be disabled for deceit or pity. He was containing something. A knock shattered the silence. Claire jolted, clutching the journal. But the knock didn't come from the front door. It came from the window. She turned, eyes wide. There, on the other side of the foggy glass, was a face. Pale, featureless, pressed to the pane like a grotesque whisper. And then, gone. She dropped the journal, scrambling to her feet. She ran to Evan, shaking him awake. "There's someone outside," she cried. He sat up, instantly alert. "What did you see?" She hesitated. I don't know. A face. It was wrong." He didn't ask for details. He simply stood, without the wheelchair, grabbed a flashlight, and headed toward the door. Claire followed him outside, trembling. They walked in silence, flashlight beam slicing through the thick dark. The woods were deathly still. Even the insects had gone quiet. "Evan, tell me the truth," Claire whispered. "What's happening?" He stopped walking, still facing away. He said, "You saw the journal, didn't you?" Claire froze. "I didn't want this for you," he said softly. "I thought I could outrun it, that if I stayed in the chair, never walked freely, it would sleep. But you seeing it, feeling it, it's awake now." "What is?" she whispered. Evan turned. His eyes looked darker than before, like something ancient was pressing against the inside. "It lives beneath," he said. "It speaks through those it marks. My injury wasn't from a fall. It was a trade, a bargain. I sealed it with my spine, with my legs. As long as I don't walk without purpose, it stays below." Claire took a step back. "But you stood last night. You walked." "I had to," he said. "It was testing the seal. It sent a vessel to tempt me. I was weak." A sound echoed through the trees, a low, guttural moan that didn't belong to anything living. Evan turned quickly. "It's here." From between the trees, shapes began to move. Not fast, not loud, just wrong. Like reality itself was being bent around them. Claire saw the figure again, the one from the window. Its face was smooth, stretched over bone like wet fabric. Evan grabbed her hand. "We have to get back. I can't hold it off out here." They ran. Back inside the cabin, Evan collapsed into the chair, panting. The creatures didn't follow. Not past the threshold. Claire shut every lock, every curtain. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, voice cracking. Evan looked at her, pain in his eyes. "Because I didn't want to lose you. Because I thought maybe I could be free." Claire sank to the floor. Her wedding ring felt like ice against her skin. She had married a man who bound a nightmare to his flesh. And now that she had seen it, now that she had touched the truth, it was watching her, too. Claire didn't speak for hours. She sat curled up on the couch, staring at the fireplace, while Evan remained in the corner, arms folded over the wheels of his chair like they were the last threads holding him together. The crackle of flames couldn't warm the chill creeping into her bones. Outside, the forest had gone still. Not the peace of nature, but the silence of something waiting. "I shouldn't have brought you here," Evan finally said. Claire turned her head slowly. Her eyes were glossy, ringed with red. "What is it?" she asked. "That thing, those faces." Evan looked down. "It's not just one. It's a gate, a doorway, and they are the echoes of what waits behind it." He wheeled himself forward, glancing out the window like he was afraid the woods might answer. "When I was 12, I fell through a cave system up here. My leg shattered. I should have died, but I didn't." Claire leaned forward. "Because of the deal?" Evan nodded. "Something found me in that darkness. Something old. It offered me a choice, life in exchange for being a vessel, a seal. My spine became the lock. As long as I accepted my fate and never tried to defy it, the gate stayed shut." Claire's throat tightened. "But you've stood. I've seen you." "It's harder to resist now," Evan whispered. "It wants out, and it's using every weakness I have against me." A log popped in the fire, and both of them flinched. Claire stood and began pacing. "What does it want with me?" "I don't know," Evan admitted. "But it sees you. The moment you saw it, it marked you. Now you're connected, like I am." Claire stopped in her tracks. "Are you saying I'm cursed?" "Not cursed," he said. "Entangled." The word hung heavy in the air. Claire clutched her wedding ring and twisted it around her finger, as if somehow she could undo the last few days. "I need answers," she said. "More than your journal. More than whispers." Evan hesitated. Then, slowly, he pulled a small leather pouch from beneath his seat. Inside was a tattered map, drawn by hand, stained with age and moisture. "This leads to the cave," he said, "to the place it first touched me." Claire stayed at the map. Her pulse thudded in her ears. "Take me," she said. Evan's eyes widened. "No, I can't." "Then I'll go alone," she snapped. He looked at her, long and hard. Finally, with a reluctant nod, he said, "We leave at dawn." By morning, the mist was thick as milk. The forest stood like a cathedral of bones, each tree silent and breathless. Evan rolled beside her, guiding her through the undergrowth. The path was long abandoned, hidden beneath layers of moss and thyme. Birds no longer sang here. They moved in silence for nearly an hour, until Claire spotted a crooked rock formation ahead, two jagged stones arched like twisted hands reaching toward one another. "That's it," Evan said. "The threshold." Claire stepped forward. The air changed. It wasn't just colder. It felt thinner, like the atmosphere couldn't fully form around her. The wind carried whispers. Not voices, but the shapes of voices. Emotion without sound. She pushed aside a curtain of vines and stepped into the cave. Immediately, her flashlight flickered. The passage sloped down into darkness. Damp walls pressing close. The deeper she went, the more her mind fought to anchor itself. Reality twisted. Her footsteps echoed wrong. Too long, too delayed. Like something else was mimicking her, a step behind. At last, they reached the cavern. It was massive, a gaping void beneath the earth, lined with wet, glistening stone. At the far end, embedded into the rock face, was a great slab of black mineral veined with crimson threads. "The gate?" Evan whispered. Claire stepped toward it. Her breath caught. The stone pulsed. It breathed. And suddenly, her ears filled with 1,000 voices, overlapping, whispering in a language she didn't understand, but felt somewhere deep in her ribs. She stumbled back. "What is it saying?" Evan didn't respond. She turned and saw him standing, but his face was slack, eyes rolled back, fingers trembling. He was whispering back. "Evan!" she shouted. He didn't hear her. The whispers grew louder. The gate's veins began to glow. A low, droning hum filled the air, vibrating in Claire's teeth. She grabbed Evan's shoulders and shook him. "Snap out of it." His eyes refocused. He gasped and fell into her arms, trembling. "It's calling me," he choked. "It's inside me. I can't fight it much longer." Claire looked back at the gate. A thin crack had appeared down the center, bleeding a black mist. She helped Evan to his chair and dragged him out of the cave as fast as she could. The wind outside whipped violently. Trees swayed and groaned. They stumbled back to the cabin just as dusk fell. Inside, Evan collapsed onto the floor. Claire knelt beside him, checking his pulse. It was there, but weak. "Claire," he whispered, "it's getting stronger. I felt it inside my bones." She didn't respond. Her eyes had locked onto something across the room. The journal. It lay open on the floor where she dropped it. Only now, it had turned to a new page, one she hadn't opened. On it was a sketch of her face, and beneath it, a note in handwriting that was not Evan's. "The seal is cracking, and the bride shall be the key." Claire stared at it, blood draining from her face. She clutched her stomach, and only then did she feel it, something moving inside her. Not a baby, not life, but awareness. Evan saw her expression and whispered in horror, "No, what have I done?" Outside, a wolf howled. Only it wasn't a wolf. It was something learning to mimic the world of men, and it was getting closer. Claire couldn't sleep, even as Evan lay unconscious on the couch, breathing in shallow, rattling gulps. Her mind spiraled in circles. The words in the journal haunted her. "The bride shall be the key." She replayed the moment in the cave over and over, the flickering whispers, the sensation in her stomach, and the unmistakable hum of something waiting. Something that had recognized her. Had the thing inside the gate infected her? She stood in front of the mirror in the bathroom, lifting her shirt, pressing her palm flat against her belly. Nothing. No heartbeat. No movement. Just skin. But in the silence, she could feel something beneath the surface, like a presence watching her from within. She splashed her face with water. It didn't help. The mirror began to fog up even though the room was cold. And as the steam thickened, words appeared in the condensation, not scrawled by hand, but etched as though by breath or thought. "You are the door." She screamed and stumbled back, knocking over a glass. The crash woke Evan. "Clay," he called groggily from the living room. She ran out, trembling. "It spoke to me," she said. "The mirror. It said I'm the door." Evan sat up, pale and drenched in sweat. "Then it's happening faster than I thought." "You knew this might happen," she shouted, voice cracking. "I didn't know it would choose you." His eyes were bloodshot. "When we married, something shifted. You gave yourself to me, heart, body, soul. And the thing, the gate, it saw that bond. It twisted it." Claire stepped away from him. "So you think I'm cursed because I loved you?" "No," he whispered, "because I let it happen. I thought I could contain it, that our love would protect you." He turned his head away in shame. "I was wrong." The power flickered, then went out. The cabin fell into deep silence, unnatural, hollow. Claire grabbed a flashlight. Its beam barely cut through the growing darkness. From the forest came the sound of crunching footsteps. Not animal, not man, something in between. Claire pulled the curtain aside. Figures moved among the trees. Dozens, maybe more. They didn't walk. They twitched, limbs bending the wrong way, eyes glowing faintly beneath hoods and hair. Evan struggled to sit up. "They are the Watchers, guardians of the gate. If it's chosen you as a new vessel, they'll come to escort you." She looked back at him, heart pounding. "Then we run." "We can't outrun them." "Then we fight." They didn't have much: an old axe, some firewood, a flare gun with one shot. Claire stood guard while Evan wheeled himself to the attic, rummaging for anything useful. He returned with a rusted box. Inside were relics, a silver pendant, marked with ancient symbols, a dagger with a blackened edge, and a piece of brittle parchment. "This was left by the man who came before me," Evan said. "The last vessel." Claire picked up the parchment. It was a ritual, half burned, half erased, but 3 words were underlined in red. Blood, bind, break. Suddenly, the front door shook, once, twice, then blew open. The forest air swept in, along with the sound of dozens of whispering mouths. Claire raised the axe. Figures stepped into the threshold, but stopped. They couldn't enter. Not yet. They waited. Evan looked at her, his expression grim. They need your consent. That's how it works. You must accept the gate. And if I don't, they'll try to make you. At that moment, the windows shattered inward. Wind roared through the cabin. Claire screamed and ducked as shards flew past her face. The watchers did not step inside, but one of them spoke. A woman's voice, high, lilting, too calm for the chaos around it. You came to the gate willingly. You touched it. You awakened it. The debt is now yours. Claire's heart raced. What debt? The figure tilted its head. The child. Evan gasped. Claire froze. What child? She whispered. You carry its heir. The voice cooed. The new seal, flesh woven from 2 lines, vessel and sacrifice. She collapsed to her knees. The thing inside her, it wasn't just a presence. It was becoming. She looked up at Evan, betrayal cracking her voice. Did you know? He shook his head. No. Claire, I swear, if I had known. But the rest of his word was swallowed by a screech that shook the trees. The figures began to chant. Claire gripped the dagger and the parchment. We have to finish the ritual. Evan grabbed the pendant and wrapped it around her neck. Blood. Bind. Break. It needs a link between you and me, and a sacrifice. Claire didn't hesitate. She sliced her palm with the dagger and pressed it against Evan's hand. Their blood mingled. The watchers howled in agony. The gate stayed. The floor beneath them quaked. The earth moaned. The pages of the journal flipped open. Words appeared in real time, drawn by invisible hands. The bond is formed. The vessel resists. The key is unstable. Claire focused on the parchment. The last step of the ritual, to break the bond, sever what was loved most. She looked at Evan. He shook his head slowly. No, he whispered. It's not worth your soul. It's not about my soul, she said. It's about everyone's. Outside, the watchers shrieked. Inside, the shadows deepened. She raised the dagger. Evan stayed into her eyes. Then he smiled. A tear slid down his cheek. I'd rather die loved than live possessed. She plunged the blade into his chest. His body convulsed, then stilled. The pendant around her neck burst into flame and turned to ash. The watchers screamed and turned to mist, dissipating one by one. The gate, miles away, cracked down the center. And then it closed. Hours passed. Claire sat in silence beside Evan's body. Dawn painted the sky red and gold. The forest was quiet again. But she wasn't. She felt empty. Not just emotionally. Physically. She placed her hand on her stomach. It was flat. Still. She wasn't sure what had been inside her, but it was gone. The price had been paid. Or so she thought. From beneath the floorboards, something shifted. A heartbeat. But not hers. Not Evan's. Something left behind. Something waiting. 3 weeks had passed since Claire buried Evan on the hill behind the cabin. The earth above his grave was still soft, covered with fallen pine needles and wildflower that had bloomed too early, too unnaturally, as if nourished by something that didn't belong to this world. She sat at the edge of the forest most days, staring out toward the unseen gate. But the gate hadn't reopened. At least, not physically. The presence hadn't left her. If anything, it had grown. It no longer whispered from mirrors or etched words into glass. It spoke directly into her thoughts, calling her by names she didn't understand. Ancient names, titles, bearer, consort, mother. She didn't answer. Not out loud. But in dreams, she listened. Every night, she saw Evan. Not as he'd been before, but whole, walking, smiling, dressed in white and standing beside a door carved from bone and obsidian. He would say the same thing every time. The child is not mine, but it carries my shadow. Claire had taken every test imaginable. Blood, ultrasound, x-rays. Nothing showed up. No fetus. No irregularities. But she knew something was still inside her. Not a baby. A seed. Something planted. And it was starting to grow. On the 22nd day, Claire awoke to the sound of scratching beneath the floorboards. At first, it was faint, like a mouse. Then louder. Like nails. She grabbed a flashlight and a crowbar and pried open a floorboard in the kitchen. The space beneath was pitch black. The scratching stopped the moment the light hit. She leaned closer. There, on the dirt beneath the house, were handprints. Small, childlike, but not made of flesh. The prints shimmered. They pulsed with a dull red glow, as though made by something that didn't quite exist in one dimension. Claire screamed and backed away. From the darkness, something whispered in a voice that was haze, but distorted. "You birthed me in death. I awaken in silence." She ran, out the front door, through the trees, toward the gate. It should have been gone, sealed forever, but as she reached the cave, she saw it. The stone had shifted. There was a crack, thin as a hairline fracture, but widening, and on the rock wall beside it, a phrase had been etched in fresh blood. "Mother shall not abandon her young." Claire dropped to her knees. Tears streamed down her face. "I didn't ask for this," she whispered. "I never wanted this." The wind answered, soft and cold. "But you chose him, and he chose us." Claire returned to the cabin and began preparing, not to flee, to finish what had been started. She returned to Evan's journals, reread every page. Somewhere, buried in his research, she found a passage he had skimmed before, but now read with new eyes. If the vessel breaks, the gate seeks another. But if the vessel births a new seed, the gate does not choose, it inherits. Claire now understood. She wasn't just the gate's vessel. She was its womb. And what had been planted inside her wasn't human. It was but the process hadn't completed yet. There was still a window, one final chance to stop the transformation. The ritual hadn't fully severed the bond. It had only transferred it. The gate was still latched to her. But if she could reverse the birth, undo the inheritance, she might stop it from ever coming through again. There was only one problem. To sever the child's tie to this world, she'd have to go inside. At midnight, she lit candles around the cabin and sat cross-legged in the center. She recited the incantation from Evan's notes. She mixed her blood with soil from his grave, and she drank a tincture he had left locked in the freezer, a potion derived from the gate's moss. It was bitter, cold, tasted like ash and rust. She collapsed instantly, and the dream began. Claire stood in a version of the cabin that pulsed and breathed. The walls were flesh. The lights were stars. The windows looked out onto a void where the forest had been replaced by a writhing sea of hands. In the center of the room was a cradle. She approached slowly. Inside was a creature, small, swaddled, faceless. It twitched and turned toward her. She gasped. It had her eyes. An Evan smile. But it was wrong. It pulsed with need. Not love. It reached out and placed a hand on her belly. She flinched, but the connection snapped into place. Suddenly, memories that weren't hers poured into her mind. Images of ancient gates, sacrifices, forests that screamed, and mothers who had birthed abominations in exchange for power. And at the center of them all, the first, the last, the repeating cycle. She tore herself away. "No," she said. "You end here." The creature tilted its head. "But you made me." "Then I'll unmake you." She pulled the dagger from the dream space, Evan's dagger, and drove it into the cradle. There was no blood, only light, and a scream, not from the child, but from the gate itself. The cabin shattered. The void howled, and everything went dark. Claire woke up on the floor. The candles were all extinguished. Her mouth was full of ash, but the presence was gone. Her stomach was still. Her soul quiet. She crawled outside and watched the sunrise. It was the first time in weeks she felt truly alone, and she welcomed it. Months passed. Claire moved far away from the cabin. She never returned to the gate. But sometimes, in the early morning, when the fog rolls in just right, she sees children standing at the edge of the trees. Not quite real, not quite gone, waiting for their mother. And once, just once, she heard Evan's voice in the wind. "You did what I couldn't." But it's never truly over. And she knows the gate sleeps, but one day it will want another heir. Until then, Claire watches and waits and never, ever loves again.